thrill for me to introduce one of my very favorite players, the Latvian-Spanish Grandmaster Alexei Shirov. Grandmaster Shirov is one of the leaders of the new generation of super Grandmasters, vying to succeed Garry Kasparov and Anatoly Karpov as the king of chess. Shirov revels in complications, daring attacks, and sacrificial mayhem. His opening play is dynamic and enterprising, his middle game is resourceful and often outrageous, and his endgame play is pure precision and logic. At the highest levels, his opponents frequently find their position in runes as another sparkling Shirov attack sets the board aflame. So, dear viewer, come join our host, Grandmaster Ron Henley, and prepare yourself for Alexei Shirov, a player that is sure to fire your imagination.
We're very fortunate today to have with us one of the world's very top players, Alexei Shirov. And I must say, when I first started looking at Alexei's games, one of the games that made a real deep, striking impression with me was a game where he played black in the Samish variation against Florin Gheorghiu, a Romanian grandmaster. Alexei, today we're going to look at your game with Gheorghiu. This was a very dynamic, very exciting game.
Well, I almost don't remember that game anymore because I played it 9 years ago, but I remember when I won it, that game, well, I was very satisfied with my plays.
D4, Knight F6. The game starts out as a Samish King's Indian, and of course you don't particularly play the King's Indian defense so much anymore today.
Well, I still play it.
After D6, F3. Now, of course, in the Samish, white builds up a very strong, powerful center. And it's really up to black to find some methods for counterplay.
Yes, but in a way, white also weakens its black squares. So there always must be counterplay for black. Of course, you never know if it's sufficient. Well, yeah, I should mention that nowadays bishop g5 instead of bishop e3 is much more popular, and this move actually gives black some pain in the neck. But I had some unfortunate experience with this line with black. But then I saw some other games, and it seems that still, I mean, it's not such a big danger. But okay, bishop e3 is kind of old-fashioned move, and I think nowadays it's more or less clear that this pawn sacrifice, which starts with c5, gives black
It's a big thrill for me to introduce one of my very favorite players, the Latvian-Spanish Grandmaster Alexei Shirov. Grandmaster Shirov is one of the leaders of the new generation of super Grandmasters, vying to succeed Garry Kasparov and Anatoly Karpov as the king of chess. Shirov revels in complications, daring attacks, and sacrificial mayhem. His opening play is dynamic and enterprising, his middle game is resourceful and often outrageous, and his endgame play is pure precision and logic. At the highest levels, his opponents frequently find their position in runes as another sparkling Shirov attack sets the board aflame. So, dear viewer, come join our host, Grandmaster Ron Henley, and prepare yourself for Alexei Shirov, a player that is sure to fire your imagination.
The next game we're going to look at is the game Shirov-Nikolenko. This was played in the USSR Championship in Moscow in 1991. And Alexei, this game is interesting for a number of reasons.
First of all, it was a very nice game, and although maybe it wasn't a perfect game because at some moment my opponent didn't defend the best way, but I really feel that to win in such a way is, gives a big aesthetical pleasure. And okay, then I also connect this game in my memory with Mikhail Tal, because you know that Mikhail Tal died in '92 in the age of 55, so he lived 55 years. And this game was played in his 55th birthday, so in fact it was his last birthday. Besides, Mikhail Tal was also playing in that, which happened to be the last Soviet championship. So he saw this game played, and well, just shortly before the game ended, when I already knew that I was going to win, I told Mikhail, look, this is my most present, and well, he said, "Really? Thank you very much." Like, he was really very happy with that, and he liked the game. So, yeah, I think these are a number of reasons I wanted to talk about this game and show this game.
So in this game, you played e4, which is also an interesting point because for quite a number of years you played d4 exclusively, and then this game marked your return to 1e4 after quite a number of years.
Yeah, and it was really occasional, this return to e4, because even after that I still stuck to d4 for 2 more years, but then from time to time I tried 1e4. And then suddenly, one day I started trying e4 more and more, and nowadays it's my main move. I mean, 1e4, I almost never play 1d4 anymore. So the main reason was that always when I was playing d4, I experienced big problems against the Nimzo defense. I had this, for example, favorite line, d4, knight f6, c4, e6, knight c3, bishop b4, f3. But this is a very dubious move, and already in 91 I knew that this move was dubious. So, although I played it sometimes, but knowing that my opponent could prepare very well for it, I didn't want. I wanted to do something different, and I knew that my opponent had very narrow but very well worked out opening repertoire. So I knew he would play Nimzo defense against 1d4, and I really didn't have anything against that. And then I noticed that since his opening repertoire was so narrow, that he exclusively played French defense with black after 1e4, and my trainer at that time, Zygmunt Lanka, had some very interesting ideas for white in that system, which I knew my opponent would play. So what I did, shortly before that game, I called Lanka. We spent maybe 1 hour preparing on the phone, although it was, let's say, international phone call, but fortunately those days in Soviet Union telephone rates were very cheap. And during that hour he explained me the main ideas of this particular variation in French defense which my opponent was going to.
The next game we're going to look at with Alexei Shirov is considered an absolute brilliant attacking masterpiece. Alexei, you said that in a poll of amateur players, this was voted the game that most players found was your favorite.
In their poll for the best games of that informant, I don't remember, it was 48 or whatever, they just, they decided this was the best game. Well, for me, talking about chess brilliance, I really prefer games where it's, when there is two-side struggle. And in this particular game, my opponent didn't play the best in the opening, and then I already had a huge advantage. Then he tried to defend well, he tried to pose me problems, but in reality I could win with several ways. But still, the final attack was very nice and I quite like it.
4, knight f6, c4. He offers a Benoni. You played d5. And then we get the Benko Gambit. Pretty reasonable opening actually for black.
Yes, I also played with black sometimes.
So you accept the pawn. And now after a6, here you made an interesting choice. Rather than accept the pawn and give black all these open lines, you played b6.
Yes, at that time, this b6 move was really my specialty. I won maybe 7 or 8 games with this and I never lost. Well, the idea is to give back the pawn immediately, not to care about this, but try to build up the positional advantage. Because in some other lines, white is normally pawn up, but black has very good position for his pieces, and white has to start boring defense, trying to change some pieces, and then finally get the advantage. But like this, you don't care about material, you just try to build up very solid position. What is interesting though is that in 91, or 92, I almost stopped playing b6 line, because I thought it was still not enough. To my complete surprise, then in 93, 94 I saw Karpov playing it. And then I started studying it more and realized that there were some hidden things which, even when I was playing the line, I didn't know. So in fact, this b6 is a very complex line, and maybe one of the best against.
One of the places where a lot of the top world-class chess professionals pick up a little extra money is in the Bundesliga in Germany, playing for many different chess clubs. And quite often you'll have a couple of heavyweights slug it out on the top boards. And this is what happened when Nunn, playing white, plays Alexei Shirov in 1996 in the German league. Alexei, you said this was absolutely what you consider to be one of your best games.
Yes, because this game for me is like a very fine combination of intuition and precise calculation. I mean, I went for the complications because I intuitively felt that this was the right way to do, that otherwise I would not have enough advantage, and of course I wanted to win the game. So I thought that this was the way to do it, but then many complications arose, and there was a moment when I was not even sure whether everything went right, but every time I was finding the best move for myself, and finally I won the game where I think I made no mistakes. So that's why I like this game the most and consider it one of my best games ever.
E4 and G6.
Yeah, this was actually one of the of my pet openings in those years. I played this setup quite often.
Knight
G6.
C3, C6, Bishop C4.
Yeah, I should mention that I don't find this Bishop C4 line as strategically sound. Although White tries to build up the direct attack, and it was actually me who was a victim of this attack twice, once against Polgar and once against Anand. But I also won 2 games with Black, so that means that there was a reason for me to continue playing this line. And although my friend, the Moldavian Grandmaster Viktor Bologan, also got crushed once in 17 moves, but it was him who suggested to me afterwards that the line was sound. Meanwhile, White has positionally much stronger moves here. One of them is f4, just very standard way to play f4 and then knight f3. And another way is to play knight f3 and later on put the bishop on e2. Meanwhile, bishop on c4, later on comes to b3, and it will be really out of play. So I played d6. Yeah.
And now White plays Queen f3, violating the principle of developing the queen early.
Yeah, but I played d6. Here, White has one very interesting.
And the game we're going to look at now, Alexei Shirov plays a very, very sharp game against the rising Dutch star.
Well, I would like to mention that this was not the first game I played this particular opening line against Van Velle. And in fact, in Tilburg 96 and also in Groningen 96, I lost with White against him. So this made me think first that the whole line was bad for White, but then I realized that there were some things that I could improve. What was interesting that by the time the game was played, the improvements were already quite known to public, so I didn't think that my opponent would repeat the line. e4, c5, knight f3, d6. So he again develops the knight variation. As I already mentioned, it became one of the most popular openings in modern chess. And this time I went for my usual bishop e3. Although, as I mentioned, against Polgar I played bishop e2 and in some other games too. So again, Van Velle played e6. And if I now played bishop e2, it would be a similar story to my game against Polgar, which I played this bishop e2 move several times, but I wasn't very happy with it. So this time I went for the sharpest, g4. Again, this was not the first time I played it against Luke Van Velle.
Here you threatened to play g5 and just send the knight away, so he played h6 to try and hold you up for a minute.
Yeah, so and I still play f4 and still want to play g5. Nowadays, there is a new idea for Black in this position, which was introduced by Kasparov against me in Linares tournament. He played e5 and after knight f5, h5, trying to break up this center. And although my game against Kasparov ended in a quick draw, but then I had another game against Topalov in this year in Monaco, and then things were not so clear. So Luke Van Velle in this game went b5, the same as he went in the other 2 games against me. So bishop g2, bishop b7. So this is a real critical moment of the game. both times in Tilburg 96 and in Groningen 96, I thought that g5 was the wrong move because of b4. He attacks my knight. If I take his knight, he takes my knight. And if I move away my knight, he takes my pawn.
Hi, I'm Smart Chess Online columnist Irina Krush. Many chess players will conjure up images of brilliant sacrifices and combinations when you mention the name Alexei Shirov. However, as Shirov himself would suggest, many of his finest artistic achievements on the chessboard have been created in the unforgiving worlds of the endgame. In this video series, Alexei Shirov presents some of the best endgames from his career. Please join our host Grandmaster Ron Henley and meet Alexei Shirov, a player who is sure to fire your imagination.
Mikhail Tal was an absolutely fabulous attacking player, but it was only in his later years that he really developed a virtuosity for endgames. But Alexei Shirov, the other great player from Latvia, on the other hand, absolutely thrives on playing beautiful endgames, even at a very young age. And this is what has really brought him to the brink of the World Chess Championship. And in this video, Alexei will share some of his finest endgames and most exciting moments in the endgame. Because as through the years technique has developed, it's much more difficult to win games right out of the opening or in the complications in the middle game. And so in-game play is very important to reach the highest levels. And so Alexei, we're going to look at a selection of your favorite endgames from your career up to this date.
Yeah, I don't even know how it happened, how it started my real addiction to endgames. Because when I was very young, like 12 or 13 years old, everybody was saying you have to improve your endgames because you just play them very badly and so on. And I was known as a young attacking player and so on, but somehow I almost felt it as a disadvantage. And although I think when I was 14, 15, I already started playing some good endgames myself, but still it was difficult to convince myself and the others that endgame could be my strong part. Until one day I started spending really a lot of time on analyzing my endgames and analyzing them for magazines, trying to make good annotations only on the endgame part. And I think the start of this, I would even call it revolution, because if this revolution didn't come out, I would never reach the level I have reached. So I think the revolution started in the year 1989, when I had, in the Soviet Junior Team Championship, I had one really fascinating endgame, which on the board I tried to do my best, but couldn't do my best, so finally missing the way to win, or at least the way to create the most of problems for him. And then when he could already make a forced draw, he also made a mistake. So it was not perfect game at all. But I analyzed this endgame so many hours afterwards, maybe 40 or 50 hours. I tried to analyze everything what was about this. And I think this was when my addiction to endgame started. So then every time when I had an interesting endgame, I would analyze that endgame as well. So this is the game which I want to present. It was played in '89 Soviet Team Junior Championship against a Lithuanian guy who is now a grandmaster. His name doesn't say much to the chess world, although he's quite strong. For example, he won a very nice game against Joël Lautier last year in Berlin tournament. And also I should mention that in the year 1986, he was Soviet Junior champion, and many players coming from ex-Soviet Union know how tough those Soviet Junior championships were. I myself played this Soviet Junior championship 5 times and never won it. So I just wanted to mention that I was playing against strong and rock-solid opponent who, by the way, did not find himself extremely comfortable in such a complex endgame, because he's mostly a positional player, and here he had to calculate everything. So black is knight and passed h7 pawn against 3 passed pawns, which can be very, very strong. Having the knight, I can try to win one of these, his two queenside pawns, to get the advantage there. So he has to try to be fast with his 3 pawns. Normally, to block these 3 pawns, I should have my king closer to the center. But if he gets his king too closer to the center, I will still not have time to get one of those pawns. Besides, I can never move my pawn, my passed pawn, until his king gets, for example, to e4. So then it will cost him time to get from after my pawn. Because now when his king is still on g3, if I just play h5, he simply wins my pawn, and then having these 3 pawns, these 3 pawns will be just stronger than knight. So I had in this moment 2 ideas. One idea was to go on after his pawns immediately, and the other idea was to try to move my king to.
So game 5, and Alexei Shirov is once again defending the black pieces in the Grunfeld defense, and the players quickly reach this position once again after 11 knight a5, Alexei.
Yeah. So I suspected that after game 3, unless he finds something special in that endgame, he would not go for that. I thought he would not even play this bishop c4 and knight e2 stuff anymore, but he still went for it, and he had an improvement in mind. So he played bishop d3, c takes d4, c takes d4, bishop e6.
Yes.
And again he plays rook c1. So I played queen a3. I saw no reason to reject from this bishop b3 move because it worked out in the game 1.
And the game followed. Game 1, queen b4.
So b6. Again he went for this bishop g5 move, but after f6 he deviated and he played bishop h4. I saw that with bishop on h4 he already prevents moves like e5, because then he just can play d5 and get this solid positional advantage. If I play, for example, a move like bishop f7, I would find myself in a very passive position. For example, he could play bishop g3, and then if I play e5, then again d5. So, and then I would have problems with my queen and so on. So I decided that the most direct way to challenge his new idea would be try to change the queens immediately, because after all, this is the move you normally play after d5. And he took the queen because he must do it, otherwise I already get all the activity I need. And after e takes d6, he played d5. And then I realized that the strategical difference between Yusupov and Anand game is that my pawn is already on f6, because Anand had his pawn on f7. And this closes my bishop and also weakens the square.